Who in their right mind would want to be a CISO today, especially at a publicly traded company?
Firmly in the regulatory crosshairs with SEC disclosure rules and a growing thicket of privacy and compliance regulations.
Subject to quarterly interrogations by a well-intentioned board that may, or more likely, may not, understand the nature and the nuance of the threat landscape facing the company.
Under constant scrutiny from members of the C-suite, such as the CFO, despite the fact that cyber threats are exponentially increasing, but the budget for security most definitely is not.
Always hearing the sweet, whispering promise of vendors that can make all of this go away. If only you buy the upgraded triple titanium data ingest and support package.
Finding the strength to motivate and manage an underpaid and overworked team to defend against the latest nation-state attacks, while constantly dealing with Dave from accounts clicking on phishing emails from Microsoft.
No wonder the average CISO's employment tenure is measured in months and not years. I'm Chris Pullen, content strategist at CIO.com.
And I'm Robin Das, Executive Director at Strategy at DataBee from Comcast Technology Solutions.
And welcome to Free the CISO, where over the course of several episodes, we're delving into some of the more unique issues faced by CISOs today, sharing guidance for alleviating these issues, and, hopefully, freeing up a little more time for CISOs to take care of themselves and their teams, all while improving security and compliance. So far, we've explored regulatory challenges and compliance, as well as the CISO's relationship with the board of directors and the C-suite. What are we covering in this episode, Robin?
Thanks, Chris. This week, we're looking at the CISO security organization. We will be hearing from two accomplished cybersecurity leaders on how they motivate the people responsible for fixing, patching, and catching the bad guys in the network. We will also try to answer two cyber-specific challenges for the CISO when it comes to managing their high-performing security organizations. First, considering the deeply technical and ever-evolving nature of cybersecurity, how do you manage people who likely know a lot more than you? And second, according to many analysts and surveys, how do you address the large gap in qualified cybersecurity talent?
Well, considering the length of your intro, we could say the same of qualified cybersecurity podcasters.
Great point. So my first conversation was with Swathi Joshi, and as she went from being in the engineering trenches to now leading a global team of engineers, analysts, and operators, would be able to tell me firsthand about the leadership and technical skills required by the CISO. Hi, Swathi. Welcome to our podcast.
Hey, Robin. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. So, I wanted to dive in with something, to sort of think about security personnel and people, because of the nature of cybersecurity, the new technology gets rapidly turned into the threat vector. But then the CISO has to hire and manage people that know sort of more than they do just to kind of stay current. And so in that type of a world, how does any sort of leader manage an organization like that?
Yeah, such a relevant question, Robin. I think with the recent kind of pivots to AI ML, right? And then also the way sort of that industry is shifted, specifically the security industry. I often hear the phrase of, I think, which I follow myself too, surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, right? I think that's true. One of the conundrums in the security industry is kind of tied to this question of generalist and specialist, right? Do you look for, say, a general software engineer who can then apply their skill set to, is it threat detection? Is it, detection engineering? Is it general automation? Is it infrastructure security? Is it application security? Or you kind of look for people who have deep expertise in specific area. I would say as a CISO, you definitely have to manage that balance. So I think at the start of the career, kind of try to be really a generalist, try to figure out different areas of security. And then hopefully, you find a passion for, this is my passion area, and then you want to spend some time there. And then as an executive, then it's kind of mine and other leaders' responsibility to figure out, okay, the right balanced level of investment, both in generalized and specialized talent.
But then with this sort of specialized talent, I guess, how do you know, how do you manage somebody in that role, or sort of know if they're being effective in that role? Because sometimes it feels like, maybe even if we sort of take the example of AI/ML, like it's so new and fresh, and there's so much jargon and there's so much technicality in there. To the generalist, it can sometimes be a little bit, I'd say, intimidating, maybe.
Yeah, that's very true. I think a couple of different things, right? Like in performance management is one, does an employee or anybody in any role have the right environment around them, which includes, say, company culture, which includes, say, engineering first mindset, security mindset? Do they have a supportive manager? Is the strategy and the vision clear? So there are all of these various aspects where a person can be effective. And then there is radical candor or effective feedback giving, right? So this is something, I love the book Radical Candor, where I think leaning into feedback, and then sort of it describes feedback is a gift, right? To be able to take that and internalize it. So I think that's kind of the hardest part. So generally, sort of I kind of think of it from these various lenses of, is this person set up to succeed? And how are sort of the other environmental factors for it, right? Within the team. The next being, okay, is there clear goals, clear strategy, and is there leaning into the feedback culture? Is feedback given? There is sort of the other aspect of this too. I think all of us go through different phases in our career, isn't it? And as it kind of relates to your personal life and your family life, and where you are in sort of your personal kind of life cycle. And I always try to kind of combine the two to see, okay, at this stage in my career, at this stage in my life, what's kind of important to me, right? Like what's kind of my non-negotiable. And I try to have those conversations with my directs to say, in terms of like personal growth, in terms of career growth, in terms of like exciting work. So to be able to balance sort of all three aspects, and then of course leaning in and providing good feedback. I think those are some of the things I rely on for performance management.
And so it's almost like, if I'm sort of reading back, it feels like the CISO shouldn't worry so much about the technicality, but almost set the culture, set the strategy, set the expectations of radical candor. And it's more the softer skills versus sort of having a deep technical knowledge of the latest, quantum computing or the latest in AI/ML.
Yeah, I think technical knowledge is equally important, right? I kind of describe the CISO role as it's a amalgamation of various skill set. The skill set needed to manage down, to kind of get respect from your engineering teams, to be able to lead them, is your kind of technical expertise, right? Like how are you able to lead teams, being able to go deep and set the strategy.
Kind of like the credibility.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, credibility. And then the CISO's role upwards is completely different skill set. It's storytelling. It's converting actual technical risks into business risk. It's tying different pieces together and saying, hey, here is one technical control, here is another mitigative control. How is that helping us accelerate our business, right? How do we do enablement? So it's completely storytelling.
And so then, sort of, one of the other things that I think about a lot is, a lot of cyber incidents involve human error and human biases. And so if we put the organization that you're protecting to one side, because around that, those are almost what the controls are designed for. For the CISO themselves and their security teams, like, what are some things to kind of keep them honest, or to kind of keep them away from sort of human error and sort of internal biases? Like, is there anything in your career that sort of has helped, or any best practices there?
Yeah. The narrative about sort of the human error, right? Like you see this in a lot of literature that comes out for phishing, right? We are all very busy, and it's a spear phishing campaign. It's so easy to go click on this, and I kind of push back to say, oftentimes the narrative is humans are like the weakest link, and I push back on that because when an incident happens, say within an organization, you're trying to handle the incident, it is your partners, counterparts within the company, it's humans who are going to help us get through that incident. So oftentimes I say, humans are not the weakest link. They are sort of our strongest asset.
And to sort of get it more tactical, like what's the foundation of that? Is it the data? Is it the people? Is it the culture? Sort of how do you it makes a ton of sense what you said, but like how do you almost like take the sort of concepts and implement it?
Yeah, I do think it kind of comes down to culture and people, and how is your decision making framework aligned to that, right? Data is interesting because I think sometimes we say, if you move the data the way you want, it'll tell the story that you want to say, right? So oftentimes we can use the data, sometimes there's bias there too, use the data to either confirm or deny sort of your hypothesis. So data alone, I think tactically won't help you, but it's okay, here is a framework, and how in this framework, how do we make a decision, right? Like, is this a reversible decision? Is this an irreversible decision? Is it a point in time decision? And who are the people making this decision? Is this somebody, a group of people who have like a vested personal interest? Then that's gonna cloud the decision making. So are we kind of logically and in an unbiased way looking at it? It's harder said than done. But I think kind of asking those relevant questions and keeping those blind spots in check when making decision would be like a tactical way to do it.
Yeah, so it's like it is less about the data or the people themselves. It is like sort of aligning to a framework and sort of keeping yourself. It seems like the framework is the thing that keeps you honest versus sort of any other thing.
That's right. It's people agnostic, isn't it?
Right.
Doesn't matter who it is. Is it Robin? Is it Swathi? No, but we are following this framework. That's the constant.
Thinking about the often cited statistic, I think I pulled one from the World Economic Forum, and it said there was like a 4 million gap of cybersecurity professionals. How does the CISO hire and retain people within this sort of supply side crunch? Especially as like the security rules. If you look at sort of security roles, they're just kind of getting harder and harder as the threats sort of get more and more prevalent, and sort of harder to detect.
Yes, I think this kind of data of, hey, are we producing enough talent? Are enough people with the right skill set coming out of schools, universities, colleges, um, to match the need, right? So I think this is kind of well established, and I like this data because it's a well established conundrum. And I think we've been focusing a lot as a security community, which I'm so excited to see in terms of early career. How can we get people the right tools? How can we have like workshops? How can we have sort of that attacker mindset? I think what I would love to see a little bit more is how can we get people from sort of adjacent industries and discipline get more interested in security, right? How can we look at like product marketing folks? How can we look at people who've been doing product management, software engineers who haven't focused on security as much, but say distributed systems or networking or some other areas, right? Like, how can we get people more interested in security and come into this field from other areas? I think we talked a little bit about, okay, you hire the CISO, is this one person responsible for the company to be not be breached, right? And that in itself is sort of a heavy load to carry. So I think, you know, I've more and more have realized after being in the industry for 15 years, sort of burnout is a huge concern. So yeah, I think we need to get better at burnout. We need to get better at getting people from adjacent disciplines interested in security.
Yeah. This is great. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Likewise, thanks for having me, Robin.
I was surprised after speaking to Swathi at the emphasis the CISO has to put on the softer skills like culture and process, as opposed to getting deep in the weeds on the technology. I liked her noble ideals of leadership, but also wondered if this was the whole story when it came to managing a security organization. I turned to Tyler Warren, a seasoned cybersecurity leader with over 25 years of experience in security, telecoms, and IT, for some additional color. Hi, Tyler. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Hi, Robin. Thanks for having me.
I did do something that you should never do, which is I went onto the comments section of the internet, i.e. Reddit, and sort of looked for, sort of incompetent cybersecurity staff, as research for this. And so there was actually some really interesting subreddits with IT just sort of going off on sort of security, and there seemed to be a real enmity there, which I wasn't expecting. Have you ever sort of experienced any of that? I think with this IT sort of hiring dilemma.
Yeah, I think we get called the Department of No quite a bit. I used to be that guy, so there's a lot of animosity between IT and security, and even end users and security. Way back in the day, I always felt like, well, we have to say no because no means you're secure. Unfortunately, I haven't been that guy for quite some time because you have to be the Department of Enablement. I like being invited to the table as early as possible when it comes to new systems or processes or things. Because if I find out afterwards, it might be a lot of work, and there might not be that instant yes, let's go do this. So if you develop your policies right and you have the right visibility and the right people, you become a partner to those IT people and the business. So you have that good relationship, and people don't want to invite you to the table because oh, Tyler's just going to say no, or he's going to add 6 months onto this because he wants this and this and this. And fortunately, where I'm at currently, I've been at Prologis for over 9 years. It took a long time to build that reputation, but now I feel like my department is engaged very early on at new things introduced to the company, because we have shown we're not just going to be, well, no, and you've got to do these 50 things that we help kind of improve the process.
Like, how do you judge if someone is effective in the role or not? Some of the paradox of security is, if nothing happens, you've done a great job. How do you know whether your team's great or they're just sort of so bad they don't even know they've been breached?
Yeah, I guess that's a good one. If we were judged by it being breached, that'd be great. I read that 27% of Fortune 100, I think it was, companies have been breached in the last 10 years. And actually that means the odds are good. But then what does a breach mean? Does it mean you hit the headlines, or is an account compromise a breach? Because everybody's had one of those. So outside of being breached or not, some of it's fairly easy to tell, and some of it gets a little more complicated. There's always the operational sides of security. My team runs about 1,000 tickets a month, And it's really easy to tell who's handling tickets like that. What type of SLA do you have? Are we meeting that SLA? And is there good or bad feedback? And you got to be careful with the feedback because I look at the feedback quite often, I guess, and I'm happy to say that most of the time it's very high scores. And I'll say almost always when it's bad feedback, it's because they didn't like the answer. So no, you can't have full access to this, to an unsanctioned storage app because I don't want you to upload data out there.
I think you said, everybody makes mistakes. And so, we know obviously the cyber incidents obviously involve human error. Like, how do you sort of minimize that human error in your teams? How do you minimize that human error in yourself and those biases? Like, how do you think about that?
I think a lot of it comes down to training and people having the experience with different tools, with different processes. If you have somebody that has not caused an outage of some sort, I say they're either early on in their career or they're not trying hard enough. Right? And maybe maybe not everybody's in a position to bring down an entire network, but it happens. I've seen it countless times throughout my career, and you have to be able to see past that. One's always forgivable.
It's a badge of honor.
Yeah, absolutely. One's forgivable, and it means at least you're trying. Two, you might have more of a problem, and then after that, there might have to be some changes.
So obviously, cybersecurity is a big data problem as much as anything. Like, how do you think about data and incorporating sort of data, and how does that help you run your teams, and how does that help you sort of staff your security organization?
Yeah, security is just another big data problem. It'd be interesting to see how all the all the things will help change that. But you can't secure something that you don't know about. So you need to know all of your assets. And everybody's been shooting for that single pane of glass. That's been a myth for decades. I think companies and security departments should do a better job of at least having all their security data in one place. And that's what we've done is we followed the business to have a data lake. So we have a security data lake. So I can report metrics out of that for management, as well as that's how the SOC works out of, because we can bring in all the data sources that helps us with false positives. It's not a single point, a pane of glass, but it is a single point of truth. So combining several data tools or IT systems or what have you, then presenting what we think is the smartest view to people that are threat hunting or reacting to bad mouse clicks and such things. That's been a big help to try to get more. Always do more with less. Try to get more out of even like junior SOC people. That also helps us know if you look at one tool, the metrics out of that tool may be great, but it doesn't know about things going on in the other 5 systems. And having all the data in one place really helps improve that and has put us in a good spot to develop AI models to kind of predict the future. Who's going to be the next one to click on a phishing email, or what threat actor is coming after us, things like that. And then you put an LLM in front of this, and again, that helps the SOC, who may be very junior, entry-level type people, ask questions in just normal language. How many people received this email, or how many alerts against a WAF has there been? So building that has really helped.
So actually, you just said something that I hadn't really thought about before, but it seems like it was that holy grail to look for a single pane of glass, but really it's not a single pane of glass. It's more just the single source of truth, because you're never going to get one pane of glass that's going to satisfy everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Because even on my team, I have people that like to operate out of completely different things or different views. So as much as I think we keep talking about that single pane of glass, we've never pulled it off, and I don't think it should be the goal anymore.
Yeah, and it's almost a red herring that you're never going to have a single pane of glass, because what the SOC team cares about is very different from what the compliance team cares about.
Absolutely.
And so as long as you have the, I guess, single source of truth, that's going to make things easier for everybody, because we're all sort of fishing from the same pool. Is that the way to think about it?
Right. Yeah.
And then that in turn, I guess it then makes the SOCs, it makes everybody's lives easier, because again, instead of us arguing about the data sets or pushing for different data sets, when it's all combined, that's great. And then we can build the panes of glass that we need appropriately. Is that?
Yeah, and it is my goal to make everybody's life easier, but I have failed at that several times, because, if you bring in dirty data and you get into can I trust this, you're in a bad position. And we've done that a few times where we've either brought it in and mapped it incorrectly, or vendors will change mappings on us sometimes. Sometimes data feeds go down. But if my team can't trust the data, this whole design was my idea. So I guess that's it's my thing to fix and my oops. So if we missed some notifications because of bad data, that's a massive disservice. So we spend a lot of time making sure that's data's correctly, and that's automated and human. Partner with data analytics is what I recommend for everybody. We have a great relationship with data analytics, because they deal with this all day long, and security data is just another place where there's data, and they can help quite a bit. It would be hard for a CISO to bring in to a new company, hey, we're going to build this great big data lake, because we're not the data people, and we don't even speak that language. So you've got to enlist the help of the experts to build stuff like that.
Yeah, how do you? That's a really interesting point, though, because how do you think about that trade-off between when we kind of think about cybersecurity is a big data problem, and in order to kind of manage this big data problem, I actually need to hire people that aren't necessarily the traditional SOC or the traditional threat hunters. So is there a trade-off there between, all right, now I have to spend a bunch of time, effort, and energy on data engineers versus like SOC analysts? And to your point about experience, I know what I'm looking for in a SOC analyst. I'm not sure what I'm looking for in a data engineer. Does that happen?
I've got a good friend of mine that's a CISO who has had pretty good luck hiring data and development background people and teaching them security. I have some third-party consultants that kind of the same. They big data background. There's one data scientist, and none of them ever knew what really security was. They're used to dealing with business data, and pretty good success in teaching them how to speak security, and talking with my team quite a bit, and even getting into interviews to see what people's day-to-day is and what's important to them. And then we've gotten it to the point where these data people are bringing us use cases like, hey, we have all this data. Have you thought about looking at it this way? So I think that works out well. I think it'd be hard to hire somebody specific. I mean, if you got a big team, heck yes. I think there's some good third parties that help with this type of stuff. Instead of necessarily having security people that are the data people, I'd rather partner with data teams, because obviously I'd want them to work on these data issues. But then as soon as that red light goes off, you're going to stop doing that, and you have to go concentrate on what that alarm is or whatever is pulling you away from that work.
Again, it's back to that security mindset. You need somebody that knows that when that red light goes off, I don't get to finish my fun data science project.
Right. The fun stops and the work starts. Yes.
Changing gears a little bit to think about the often sort of repeated statistic. I think according to the World Economic Forum, there's like a 4 million gap of cybersecurity professionals. So like, how do you think about hiring and retaining people within that environment? And especially as we've all heard about burnout and the security roles are getting harder and harder.
Yeah, that number, it started like when it was 1 million a few years ago, right? Now it's 4 million or whatever. I don't buy that.
That's inflation for you.
Yeah, it's inflation. I don't believe I know anybody right now in the security world that's unemployed. There are people that change jobs quite a bit, especially in the vendor space. So I'm not sure where that number comes from. I know, like I mentioned earlier, there are people that are trying to break into this career from either 2 or 4 year college or the boot camps, and I've had some pretty bad situations there where it just didn't work out. So I'm not sure there's that problem. Now, keeping people employed, everybody's working to live and to retire. Most of us in the security world, I hope at least, are lucky enough that we like what we do, so it's not really work. But there's always going to be somebody else in this field is going to pay more money. A lot of people in the security industry, and IT's been this way forever. You can walk across the street and make more money. That's easy. And then the grass is always greener over there. But are people really interested in what they're doing? Can we offer them, hey, here's what we're working on, and here's why, and hopefully it's super cool. And here's training opportunities, and here's how we can help you keep up with all the technology growth and all the security issues out there. And I really like it when people see that part of it that drives them, because that shows that hunger and that curiosity. So, if you want to make another $1 an hour, go next door if that's what you're driven by. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I'm lucky to say I've got people on my team who really like to see the sometimes bleeding edge technology that we're in, as well as business goals that are forward thinking and interesting to work on. So I hope that's what keeps them happy, and I'm doing okay so far. Knock on wood. Don't want to jinx myself.
So, Chris, the first thing I took away from speaking to both Swathi and Tyler was that a CISO needs to implement zero trust everywhere except for their people. And that while we sometimes consider humans to be the weakest link in cyber, they are also a security organization's strongest asset.
So that's how you free the CISO? By setting the right culture and tone?
Well, it's a great start. There is also a role for data to play, and while there might never be a single pane of glass across an organization, because it would have to be a very large piece of glass, there can be a single source of truth. And that is a key enabler for teams to work better together.
And did you ever solve the mystery of the missing million security personnel?
Not so much missing as misplaced or mismanaged, and with the right motivation might manifest their mojo.
Well, now that we've covered the letter M, and security organizations, the board, and regulations, in our next episode of Free the CISO, we will be looking at vendors and technology. With so many vendors and so little time, how does the CISO distinguish from snake oil as a service to something that might actually make a difference? Should you open source or open checkbook? And just how many steak dinners can you have before you feel obligated to sign a purchase agreement?
Thanks for listening to Free the CISO, a podcast by DataB from Comcast Technology Solutions. Stay tuned for our next episode on CIO.com, the number one resource serving the evolving, challenging, and demanding role of the Chief Information Officer. CIO.com provides these important decision makers with the information they need to lead their organizations into the digital-first age. The views and opinions expressed by the participants are their own and do not reflect any official policy or position of Comcast.